because it was people painted with like their faces painted, machetes, and just charging towards the church, you know. And once I saw that, and they were throwing rocks, they're like, you know, whatever. And then a bunch of other people came inside the church too, myself and.
So you immediately recognize, okay, that's severe danger.
Yeah, it's scary. Like my
Yeah.
intuition was like, this is not good.
Yeah.
You need to go back inside the church. Went inside, and then everybody else was coming in. At the same time, people were screaming. You know, they're like, oh, like you know, it was crazy. Went back inside the church, and then I was with my siblings at the time. But this is where we got separated now, because at that time I didn't know where they went. Like I was inside the church, and then other people came, and it was like packed to where we couldn't, like I couldn't move around. And I'm 11, so I'm young.
Yeah.
And then now it's older people too, women in there. The man, I believe, went to also face them and go towards them. But I didn't see any of that. This is some of the things that I found out later on. Once we got inside the church, they locked it. We had these two main doors that open up. Mm-hmm. They locked those doors, and then they put the people...
The people attacking from,
the people
from the
attacking,
outside?
Correct.
Oh.
Yeah, they locked it. And the church was made out of, like, there was wood around it, like, around the church. So they locked it, and then they put people's bikes on the main doors, so you couldn't open the doors. And then on the sides, they took the mattresses that I mentioned people brought, and then they like pretty much placed them around the church, and then they put gas, kerosene, and then they lit it on fire. And then I just remember people screaming. At first, I didn't even see the fire. It was just like people screaming, and then that's when they said that the church had been put on, like set on fire. And then now it's like everybody's trying to get out. But remember, the main doors where we come from, they're locked, so we can't even get out. They had some windows. Some of them were open, so people were able to jump outside the windows. But by the time I was getting out, or, you know, it was like towards the end. And I think that's why I was burnt. Most of them, like I was one of the people that was badly burned. It was a few of us that were burned. So 4, including myself, and then there was an older lady too that was badly burned. And so for me, I came outside the church towards the end of the fire, and the reason like my hands got burnt and none of my other sides is because things were falling off now by the time I was leaving, so I was protecting myself from the fire, and that's why my head got burned, because things were just falling off, and you know everything was hot, and I'm trying to make my way, and at some point it was like I'm trying to make my way, and people are stepping over me, people are trying to get out and whatnot. So by the time I got outside the church, I was one of the last few people. I always say it was a miracle how I got out, because I remember I was inside, you know, screaming. You see it's like orange, red, color, smoke, all that stuff. And then the next thing, I'm outside the church, and it was like, I almost felt like I got picked up. And, you know, it was, and I think that's why I'm also grateful so much about life, because it's like, I could have been dead. Anything could have happened at that moment.
What do you think? Because I know your book, you talk about that pivotal moment where I do not know how I got out of here. What do you think what does your gut say?
I always say that I always attribute that to like a bigger calling over my life. Like I don't know what it is. I'm probably living in it right now, but I always just think that because the way my life has panned out, like it's pretty good. Like with everything that happened,
So divine intervention got you out of the church.
Yeah,
That's
I would
awesome.
say that, you know, there's a higher power out there. I attribute it to God that, you know, he did that because he has a reason behind that. I don't know it yet, but it has to do with my purpose.
That's awesome, man. So you got outside and then realized you were burned at that point?
No, I didn't know I was burned. So I got outside. Now this one I'm seeing dead people on the ground. Some of them are covered with like the lesos. They're kind of like blankets that were there, you know. And then I'm walking outside the church. And at this point, I'm not even like scared of people being dead. I'm not. The way I would describe the feeling is like, think of like if a bomb dropped or something. And then you know that even in movies when you watch and you can't even like hear, or you're just like, what's going on? That's the type of feeling I had going on like the whole time as I was walking. Shock. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Walking outside, and then once I got outside the church premises, I was trying to go back to my grandma's house because I didn't know where else to go. Like at this time, people had already left. Like most of the people that were fleeing had already like left, so I couldn't see anybody on the way. And then I was trying to go up to my grandma's house. That's when I met a guy. You know, it's actually a few people on a corner that had a machete, and you know they asked me. They were like, if I want to die, then I better continue how I'm going. And this was in Swahili, but
As in back to your grandma's.
yeah, back to my grandma's house. But if I want to
Wow.
live, then I better follow everybody else. And it's not like you better. It's like they're telling me that's what you should do. And then I was so confused. So as soon as they pointed like to follow where everybody else is going, that's when I looked and I did see people are going that direction. I could see like one or two people. And at that time, that's when I met with my sister and my aunt. And then my sister saw me and she was shocked, like how I looked. But I didn't know how I looked. So she asked my aunt, like, should she tell me how I look? And I was like, and she was like, no, don't. And then I tried walking their pace, but they were walking very slow. So I just passed them and I just kept going.
So they didn't even tell you how bad it was at that point?
No, they
Wow.
didn't. Yeah. And none of us knew because at that time, my skin was still fine. Like nothing had fallen off. No scars had came. It was just like, think about when you're burning or you're cooking or you're cooking something from the inside to where the skin still is on top. Like it still looks good, but the inside is pretty badly burned. And
So it's a deep burn.
exactly, because 3rd degree, like you're really pushing it, and it's like deep tissue. So walked all the way. It was like I think I don't know what it is in miles, but less than 2 miles or about 2 miles to get to the main road. Once I got there, that's when I saw my grandma. As with everybody else walking, she saw me. She started screaming. She was trying to come hug me. I believe that's what it was because she was coming towards me. A bunch of women grabbed her. She fell. And then there was a guy with I would say it was a good Samaritan, like a guy with a pickup truck that was picking people up to go to the hospital. And I was the last person to get on that pickup truck. So even when I think about some of these things, like how I got out the church as the last person, how I got on the pickup truck as the last person, I'm always like, it's got to be God. It's got to be something bigger than me. Because they would have, taken the last person before me and took off. And then I would have probably had to walk or whatever. But that wasn't the case. Somebody helped me to get on the truck, the pickup truck. And then they took us to the hospital. I stayed in the hospital until my dad came. They had told him the church had been burnt, but I was like slightly burnt. And even with my mom, that they had told her at this point that I was burnt, but it was like a little scratch because they weren't trying to like scare her or also get her to like be uptight or just like, oh, your son has been burned. Like you can only imagine like how a parent feels after hearing like the kid had been burned.
Yeah, how bad is it?
Yeah. So I stayed in the hospital, and at this point I didn't know I was burned, but as I was just there sitting waiting, I just kept like nodding my head and hitting the wall, and then that's when I smelled like it smells like something burnt, like and that's when I turned back and I looked at it and I could see like some of my hair like stuck on the wall, and that's when I was like, oh man, that's me, like I'm burnt, like
Did it register how bad that was at the time, or were you still kind of in shock?
Still in shock. Even when I looked at it, I just said, and I kept going like this, like I just kept doing this, but in my head, that's when I was thinking, I was like, that's me, like that's my scars, I'm burnt, like I mean that's my head, my hair that's there, and it was making like a black mark on the wall. Next day, my face had started to swell. So it was like everything was swollen. I couldn't see. I could only hear. Everything was in pain. Now the pain started kicking in.
And that was the second day?
Yeah. Woke up. Now I'm in pain. Like my head hurts. My hands hurt. Everything just hurts. And then they were giving me meds and everything. My mom came. When she came in, I didn't even know. Like I didn't even see her because I couldn't see. And that the eyesight thing lasted for like almost 5 days. It was like a week type of thing because I had it like the swelling had to come down.
One thing that blew me away from reading about that is when your eyes were swollen shut, there was people in the hospital that was from the same party that the attackers were from, taking care of you. So you had to sit there and you couldn't see, and you were also wondering am I going to get attacked?
Right. Yeah. So same tribe. So the people that attacked us, they speak a certain way. Same way, here you could have, for example, you have people who speak English or from Native Americans, they speak different versus Mexicans. They're different. They have different backgrounds. So the same people that I heard attacking us are the same people that are working, but that's because Eldoret is mostly filled with, like I said, people from Eldoret are from like one major tribe. I'm trying not to get political and name names and stuff like that, but so I could hear that, and I was asking my dad like, why are we here with these people after they try to kill me? Why? And then my dad was like talking to them, and at that time I didn't know what they were conversing about, but I was like, why are you talking to these people? And they just tried to kill us. Yeah, that's how it was at the hospital. I was scared. Even every time he would leave and maybe go watch the news or something like that, I was scared. Like, what if they come and like finish me or anything like that, you know? But yeah, back to my mom. She came. I heard her voice. I didn't know who she was, like where she was and whatever. And she was emotional. She started crying, but I couldn't tell why. Like, it was just like, well, mom, like, where are you at? Because it felt like I was pretty much blind. That's what it was. And then I would spend time. They ended up switching with my dad because my mom said she's not leaving. She's not going anywhere. She's gonna stay by my side, and she actually ended up staying with me in that hospital for 3 months. And it was like always, it was surgery, in and out surgery. Like almost every day, I was having surgery. Sometimes they would cancel the surgery, so I started losing a lot of weight because I would be scheduled to have surgery today, and then they would postpone the surgery and say I'm gonna have it in the evening. And when you're having surgery, you can't eat past the midnight before. So soon as it's midnight, you can't eat if you're having surgery the
Oh,
next
so
day.
then when it would get pushed, you had to continue fasting.
Exactly. Till like
Oh,
late evening. Only for them to come and be like, oh, this doctor is busy today. You're not having surgery. It's tomorrow. So maybe I would have one meal, and then now after midnight, I can't eat again and go through the same thing. So sometimes I would have the surgery. Sometimes I wouldn't have the surgery. They would cancel. And my mom was very obedient with whatever the doctor said, so she wouldn't let me eat, even if I cried. Like, there were times I was crying, and I would ask, can I just eat? And I started losing weight. I started walking funny. And then even being in that hospital, when the nurses like brought me in and everything, they didn't know that I had a scar behind my back. That's when my mom was taking off my clothes and like looking at me fully. That's when she realized like I had over my belt area behind my back, I had a big scar. And I think that's after she realized that, that's when I started feeling pain. But I didn't even know it was there at the time. But maybe because they were also giving me pain meds, so I didn't feel it. But she realized that I had a scar on my back, and then now I had to sleep like flat as well, barely getting any food. It just wasn't good.
no.
Yeah, so they did the best they could at that hospital, but then it was time for us to move to a better hospital. So the government facilitated for us to be able to get help to move to a better hospital, which is like a missionary hospital, which had people coming from the U.S. to come treat, other, not just burns, but other diagnoses that people had. And this one was better because I ended up getting a doctor by the name Dr. Richard Bransford, and he was dope. And like this, first of all, growing up, I didn't really know. I never even interacted with I guess white people or Americans or anything like that. So this is the first time, and this guy is nice. And we call Americans Mzungu in Kenya.
What's that mean?
That's like, it almost means white person, but it's not. It's like people love it. Like if you came out there and they kept saying that, it's just like, it's the same way if you go somewhere you've never seen black people and now you're seeing black people and you're like, whoa, who are those? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
So it's Mzungu is like, I guess it's just a white person. That's what it is. So every time we just be like Mzungu, and then going there and seeing the doctor and he's nice, and then now you have missionaries. We had people from most of the doctors that were treating us or other people at the hospital had their kids. They came to they had a missionary school out there. So we would engage with people like maybe a little bit older than me that would come and teach me English, that would teach me math and all that stuff. But that's Dr. Bransford, met him there. Once he took over us, because they put us in the same in the same ward, but it was me, my friends Mercy, Mary, and Jadida, and now there was the older lady as well. So it was 5 of us there. We kind of got like our own unit, burn unit that we stayed in. And then he came and he changed our diet. He started giving us more protein. Like we were getting more meat than everybody else because he said since we're burnt, our scars they need to heal and they need a lot of protein for them to be able to heal. And within a short time, I started gaining weight. At some point, I used to drive. I didn't even talk about this, but I used to go with a wheelchair, just because the walking was hard. And then especially in the first hospital, I used to do a lot of walking with the pushing the wheelchair, and even for my back because the way the burn was, I started sitting a certain way that my body almost became like that. Kind of deformed sort of. But when I started eating at Kiambaa Hospital, I started to regain weight. I started running around and everything like that. And then I believe that's one of the reasons the healing started, as much as it is physical, but a little bit of excitement started kicking in and everything like that. But I spent 3 months in the first hospital, and then I spent 7 months in the second hospital, and it was all I never left. Like it was just throughout the whole time that I was there.
Wow.
And then I ended up after that going to boarding school for a little bit, and then we had good Samaritans, people that came together to facilitate for us to come to the U.S. for treatment at Shriners Hospital in Sacramento. And they were trying to raise like 30 million shillings for us to come. And last minute before we came to the U.S., the Kenyan government took over and kind of just helped us with the Shriners Hospital is free. So they helped us with housing and transportation. So that was taken care of. And we were supposed to come for only 8 months. The four of us, the older lady couldn't come because of the age factor. And Shriners only goes up to a certain age for treatment. I think it's 21. But they say 18, but I think they could push you up to 21 if you really need surgery. So she was over, like she couldn't come because she was older than that. And then once we got here, it was just my mom and I. So during this whole time I'm in the hospital, my siblings are also staying. My dad's business is burnt. They're not even going back. They're staying in a cathedral. That's where they were staying for a while before relocating from Eldoret to somewhere else from my siblings. So my dad would go check on them, and then he would come every day and bring me food. He would bring me like meat, soup, and that's in the first hospital. And then now in the second hospital, it was harder to see them because the second hospital was like almost like 82 miles from where the first hospital was and where they were at. And I think that year I probably saw my siblings like once or twice. And then after the hospital, we moved, but not to the same place, closer to like where the hospital was. So that was like my new home. And then I went to boarding school. But then when they did the fundraiser for us, we were able to come to the U.S., but it was only our mothers that could come. So it was 3 ladies and four girls. One lady had two girls, pretty much her daughter and her granddaughter that we came with. Yeah, and then it was surgery after surgery. I've had about 24 surgeries here in the hospital because I did ask at some point, and I believe in Kenya it has to be over 50. It was like close to 100 surgeries is what I've had because it was in the first hospital. I was in and out every time. They were washing me. They would go clean my head and everything like that. Yeah.
Man, so your mom got over here. You got to live with her. The surgery stopped at some point, and you healed. And what was that like to get into America and live here?
Yeah, so first of all, coming to America was a whole story by itself too, because as much as I say I was learning English, I didn't really know English. Like I didn't really know how to even if you say I knew English, like I don't really know how to pronounce words. I don't know how to say certain things. So the way I was shocked by, when people would talk to me, it was always like, whoa, what did you say? What did you say?
Slow down,
like,
please?
you know what I'm saying? Like that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And then it would get tiring because you'd always be like, what? Say, pardon? Excuse me? Like those are the things that like I knew. So I used to say that a lot. And then it was the same way for me. Like they would be like, what? And then it was always like they would just look at you like, what? And then it's like, bro, I just said, like, what do you mean what? I just told you what. But I didn't know that there was a language barrier. I didn't even know there was like it didn't hit me at the time. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to start learning English by repeating the same way they pronounce something. So in school, because I came here like towards the end of 5th grade, and I did like 2 months of 5th grade. I would just copy whatever, like if you said hello to me, like I would just start saying hello. And then like the way you pronounce certain words, how are you, Anthony? And I'd be like, oh, my name is pronounced Anthony, not Anthony. For me, it'd be like Anthony. So even that, they used to make fun of that. Like kids would be like Anthony. Like they would make little funny sounds like where I come from. But that's not
like
even,
bullying?
that's a South African thing. Yeah. But at the time, I didn't even know it was bullying because I am coming here for the first time. So having to understand the language is like one thing. Now I got to understand like what bullying is. Because, fast forward, even when I went to middle school, we would watch movies after school program movies. That's when I found out some of the things that they used to say to me earlier on were bullying. Like, for example, they would call me Freddy Krueger. You know who that is, right?
Yeah.
From Nightmare on Elm Street. And then they would call me Two-Face from the Batman movie. And then they would just laugh. But I never could laugh because it would just be like, what? Like, I don't know what it is that they're talking about. Until when I watched that movie at after school program, and that's when I was like, oh, shoot, that's who they've been saying like this whole time, that's me. But at that time, I didn't really get offended because I've always had humor, like growing up. So even by the time it hit me, I just laughed it off and I was like, that's kind of funny. But yeah, I experienced bullying when I came here. Kids used to take off my beanie and they would run with it. They would ask me if, oh my God, are you hiding your brain under your head? They would ask me if I get like disability checks or something like that, or if I get like, when I go on the buses, do they let me in for free? And I never really understood that. And that's later on is when I came to understand a lot of things. Like, if you're disabled, you probably get like a government check, monthly. You probably get like, they let you get the bus pass for free, or there's some certain perks. But at the time, I never really understood like what some of those things were. But when I did understand that they were bullying me is when they would take off my beanie and say certain things.
Yeah.
That's when I started also saying things back at them, and they wouldn't like that. And then I used to, back in 8th grade, one of my friends used to beatbox like a lot, and then I used to just like say funny things, and then they would like laugh like during lunchtime. I don't remember now what I used to say, but I would just say things. So I started becoming friends with some of the kids that I guess were the cool kids at school, and that kind of helped me get outside, like, not being bullied, but now being part of with the bullies, but not really bullying other people, but being safe from them bullying me because I was hanging out with them.
Yeah.
And that same thing transitioned to high school, because the same high school I went to was just right next to the middle school, and it was the same people that I was with, that I was hanging out with at lunch.
Do you still get images and flashes and memories from times on things you don't want to think about? And if you do, how do you handle that if you're comfortable answering?
Nowadays, the only thing that scares me is the fact that, like, think of like PTSD. So I'm always thinking like, what if at one point as I get older, I start like losing it? You know what I mean? Like without knowing, like where I'm just like, I barely remember things, or I'm acting a certain way, but I don't even know because of how much trauma I've gone through. Because in 2020, my mom, that's the first time we went to Kenya after 10 years. My mom had a blood clot. When she landed at SFO, she collapsed. She had a cardiac arrest, like 3 of them, like in the same transit from the airport to the hospital. And pretty much a blood clot like traveled and blocked her lungs. And at that time she came with my sister. They went back to the States with my sister. I stayed another week because I had some projects I was doing. And my sister called me and told me that mom had fallen, and she didn't say too much, but she was crying and yelling. And then, but my mom ended up being in the ICU. And once I heard that she was in the ICU, I wanted to come back. I just left Kenya the next day and came back to the States. But as soon as I got back, I saw my mom. She was different than how I had left her, because we were together in Kenya, and we escorted her to the hospital. To the airport along with my uncles and everything. She was fine. Everybody was good. But then after she lands, everything goes haywire. Things just go crazy. When I got back, I started having panic attacks. Like I remember I was sleeping that same night, and then I had like a pain on my forehead, and then I woke up, my heart was beating fast, and I actually thought that I was having a blackout. Like I remember I started shaking, and then I called my sister, and I was like, call 911. Like I'm dying.
Yeah.
And then she called the 911. They came over. They said my heart rate was high, but they said I was fine. There's nothing wrong with me.
What are you talking about? I'm
like,
fine.
Man, I'm dying. Like, what do you mean? And then the same thing happened again. So I had another panic attack when I was hanging out with one of my friends at the movies. I just started having my heart beat fast, and I was like, oh my God, I'm dying, like my heart attack. But it was just anxiety. So I started having things like that going on. And even when my mom started coming back, she couldn't see for a while, because when she had the cardiac arrest for like I think 6 minutes or something like that. I don't know what the time was, but her brain wasn't getting oxygen. So that's when you start dying, when your brain can't get oxygen, and it was blocked because the air couldn't go through her lungs. Right, seeing her experience those things, it did something to my mental. I started having back pain. I started having I would shake in my sleep and all those things. And at one point I went to the hospital. They made me do, like, I was getting massages. Like I would go pay for massages. I would go pay for what is it called when they poke you with the little needles?
Acupuncture.
Yeah, I did a lot of that. And I was trying to, that would be recommended by the doctors. They gave me a bunch of medicine. My muscles started getting tight. Like my muscles would be tight all the time. I got like muscle relaxers. I was scared to take those, so I never took those. But those are some of the things that I was having. And I decided to do therapy because somebody suggested that. And when I was doing therapy, the therapist told me that I'm experiencing some of these things because they were triggered when my mom was in the hospital, and even seeing her at the hospital had to do with something with me being in the hospital, and that's why I was like that. It took me a while to believe because I was like, I don't even know how those things are related. But that's when I was like, so, and he would say sometimes stress and pain and things that you go through, if you suppress them or you don't do anything with them, they could be stored on your body.
Yeah.
And that's when your body starts acting like that. And then that's when I would worry more about, like, even now, what if something happens in my life at one point and it triggers all those things? Maybe I feel like I've healed, but they're somewhere in my body and they start coming up. So that does scare me. That frightens me. But one of the reasons I wrote this book is because I wanted to push out forgiveness. You know, you've gone through a lot of trauma. One of the best ways to heal is forgiveness, like forgiving somebody. But then even if you're going through something that maybe doesn't have to do with forgiveness, you just have low self-esteem or you don't think you're beautiful or anything like that, I would like to just say to that person, they should not internalize those things that they're going through. Don't allow those things to become their identity, because a lot of things happen to us, like as we're growing up. You know, you go through a lot of bullying. You have maybe you feel like your parent doesn't love you, or one of them is always mistreating or anything like that. I would just tell you to, like, keep pushing, stay positive, do a lot of I would even say, like, affirmations. Like, just remind yourself that you're beautiful and that you are capable of anything, because that's one of the things.
Even if you don't believe it at first?
Yeah, even if you don't.
Okay,
just
wow.
because it's going to catch. I believe in thoughts. Like, your thoughts become your reality. One of the things that changed for me in this book is when I realized I was no longer a victim, and became a survivor. And that had to do a lot with the Burn Foundation. When I went there, they kept pushing, like, we're survivors, you're a survivor. And that connotation, the word survivor carries, is way different than a victim. So you need to start looking at yourself as a survivor, or as something, until you become that thing. Because the more you keep telling yourself that thing, the more you're going to believe. The same way you're telling yourself, oh, I'm ugly, oh, I'm not good enough, or nobody loves me. That same thing, just switch that and start saying the opposite of that. And with time, even people around you will see that. You radiate that energy. And by the time you know it, like, now you're no longer that negative person that you were, or sad, or going through those things, just by your thoughts.
That's awesome. So even if you don't believe it at first, say good thoughts to yourself.
Yeah,
time.
Just keep encouraging yourself, because at the end of the day, like I said, there was a time that I had to sit down with myself and realize that I'm gonna have these scars for the rest of my life, and I never had anything to do with them. I never voted. I never went to the church knowing I'm gonna get burned. So that's stuff that happened to me, right? But that doesn't define the person that I am. And I always believe that the person that you are inside of you is deeper or bigger than whatever else people say you are, or whatever else that comes your way, or things that happen to you are not you. You were created to do something, to be somebody. The reason we met is probably because of the way I think or whatever. But if I was a negative person, you wouldn't know my story. You wouldn't know who I am. So it's always just think positive and push towards positivity as much as, and I'm not saying it's easy. I understand. I had to go through a lot of that. I had to do a lot of forgiveness. I had to sit down with myself and be like, did I really forgive these people, or am I just saying this? But I did. I forgave not people. Some people don't even believe that I forgive people, but I think for me, you could see it, because that's the first time I started healing, is once I forgive and really understood that I'm gonna have these scars for the rest of my life. So for anyone that's struggling with anything, you keep pushing.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a comment. Show these guests some support. What part impacted you the most, so we can make them feel really good. These are real stories and raw emotions. Thank you.